Why are used BMWs so cheap? I love a great deal like the rest of you, and nobody wants to get ripped off. So when I scour the classifieds, I find an endless sea of 3, 4, 5-year-old BMWs that are less than half of what they were at the original sticker price. That's very inspiring because I love a great driving performance sedan like you're finding with the many BMWs. Let's get into it now. Life's too short to drive boring cars. The first reason why I find that a lot of people are not buying used BMWs regardless of the amazing deals, a lot of it has to do with perceived performance. Think of a BMW 330 for example. 2-liter turbo 4, 250 horse, 0 to 60, 5.5 seconds. How about this E60 M5 with a V10, 507 horsepower, 201 mile per hour top speed, 0 to 60 in 4.3 seconds. These numbers matter to car enthusiasts, but in reality on a used car market, most people are looking for something that's reliable. They want something that's predictable, they want something that has all of the amenities, but they're far less reliant on performance numbers. Rather than looking for the ultimate performance numbers, the 0 to 60 times, the quarter mile times, the horsepower, and all of those facts, expensive tires, expensive brakes, performance parts, expensive oil services, a lot of people don't want that. So this perceived performance just simply doesn't matter to the vast majority of people looking for used cars. Now, a lot of us love these used BMWs, and I've always driven used BMWs. This car here, our E60 M5, for example, I knew right when I saw this car on Top Gear with Jeremy Clarkson walking through it, complaining, moaning about all the problems with the turn signals and the stereo and the infotainment, and then ultimately it all changed when he hit the M button. Secondary buyers really don't care about that 507 horsepower and all that performance and the heads-up display. Rather, they just want to get to work in a simple fashion. That there now leaves these cars on the market for those few small pool of buyers like you and I who want these kind of exciting cars. The fact is, because of that small pool of people, that just generally drives down prices. The second reason why these used BMWs are so cheap comes down to the lease saturation. 59.8% of the BMWs purchased today are leased. That's right, a lot of people look at a BMW and they say, I want that experience, I want to enjoy a BMW. And those that can afford it brand new will generally quite often lease. That way they can walk away after 3 years and say, you know what, I've had that experience, I've enjoyed the car, but now I'm not worried about reliability problems because warranty has covered me for the entire duration of that lease. What we find is this vast majority of these vehicles hit the market. There's literal floods of vehicles that pour into the market. X3s, 3 Series, 5 Series, even some of the executive cars, the 7 Series, 8 Series cars that a lot of people would just lease because they strictly don't want to absorb the maintenance costs after 3 or 4 years. Cars like the M3s, the M2 competitions, the M5s, the cars that are real enthusiast cars, people quite often buy those. But it's all the garden variety stuff, you know, the 330s and the X3 and the 30i's. It's the generic high volume cars that people generally lease. Those vehicles come back off of a lease, they slam the market, and now what we see is like we saw in Tesla world, where Hertz dumped all of their fleet onto the market and it saturated the market. Way too much inventory. What does that mean? Way too much volume of products and not enough buyers. That nastily nosedives the value of a lot of these used cars. Did you realize the average BMW is going to cost you more for insurance than say your average Honda or Toyota? You could expect an extra 10, 20, maybe 30% on top of the premium, as well as fuel costs, because now you're using premium fuel. They generally use a little bit more fuel because of the performance caliber of a lot of these vehicles. This one here is absolutely horrific. If I get 15, 16 miles a gallon, consider that a lucky day. But even some of their performance, Turbo 4s, Turbo 6s, don't generally get as good a mileage as you're getting with, say, Hondas, Toyotas, even Mazdas. You can expect an extra $200, $400, $800 per year on fuel costs alone based on the average driving that a person does. These come with run flat tires. Sure, it's convenient. You take a nail, you drive home, you're able to drive the vehicle to the tire shop, to your home, whatever to get you home in one piece. You don't have to do a roadside change, but that convenience comes at a cost. You're expecting an extra $200, $300, $400 per tire to put on this vehicle. Compare that to $80 to $150 for an average tire of the same size on Hondas and Toyotas. You're saving a ton of money. The worst part is Most tire shops will not repair a tire like this with a run flat, and as a result, you even pop one, especially if it's an all-wheel drive vehicle like an X3 or an X5, you quite often have to change out the entire set, especially if you're down below that 70-65% of the tire wear. So you could find yourself picking up a nail, your tires are half worn, they've got 2 seasons on them, next thing you know, you have to throw the whole tire set away. It gets extremely expensive, and they're very heavy and ugly to replace. Expensive oil changes, $300-400 every time you take it in. The vast majority of these costs go into the service and maintenance costs, and that scares people. That's why a lot of people don't want any part of these high maintenance costs. The next leak or check engine light pops up, and guess what? That could mean another $250 just diagnostic fee just till you check it into the shop so they can have a look at it. Reliability ratings are very important, and unfortunately a lot of people do get hung up on that, and in some cases for real good reason. I mean, an E60 M5 like this comes with extraordinarily high repairs. SMG pumps, big brakes. You talk rod bearings you have to do every 60,000 miles. But J.D. Power's dependability study of 2024 shows that the average Toyota has only about 140 problems per 100 vehicles, whereas the average BMW is at about 190 problems per 100 vehicles. So it's about another 40 or 50% more likely of having more problems with BMWs, according to J.D. Power. Consumer Reports, they have another select number. Lexus, number 1 on their ratings. Toyota, number 2. And guess what? BMW's number 15. The average reliability ratings of these are only in that 2 to 3 star. Well, they're fun to drive, and if you're a DIYer, you can have your cake and eat it too. The fact remains is reliability is always up for debate with a modern day BMW. As a result, more people are looking for those used Toyotas on the secondary market. These cars are just walked on by, and people sleep on the average BMW, not even knowing that some of these are actually gems and are actually quite reliable. Let's face it, the average Toyota is going to cost you between $400, $500, maybe $600 per year, depending on the year and the service required. The average BMW is going to cost you anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 a year, with a car like this costing probably closer to $2,500 to $3,000 if you include some of the other big repairs. So the average BMW is going to cost you probably 4 times what it'll cost for the average Toyota at the same given time frame. A lot of people just clearly don't want that on the used market. And while vehicles like this, when they're new, they're great, people don't worry about it under warranty, and a lot of these come with service plans. Some of these cars even come with an electric water pump, like the N54, the N55. That was the older generation turbo inline 6s, and those electric water pumps were highly failure prone. And I had an N54 Power 335i from 2007. I had to do a water pump. I had to do the thermostat, which connected up to it, and it was a very difficult component to change. You had to jack up the car, pull half the bottom apart, and of course you spent 8 hours on the garage floor just changing those parts. Of course, roundabout way, you're going to spend a couple $1,000s to do those parts, and they're only going to be good for about 50,000 miles. Cooling lines, oil filter housing, gaskets, of course, those are going to cost you $1,500 to $2,000 with parts and labor. You're constantly spending money in a hard dollar way. Did you also realize if your iDrive screen craps the bed, you're looking at a couple $1,000. Modules for everything, modules for headlights, modules for airbags, modules of any sort, and there's even modules for your tail lights. We had a module fail on our X5, and they quoted us something like $1,200, and I said, forget about it, we'll drive around with a burnt out tail light. We also have to expect that most BMWs have more features, more technology, more modules, and of course more modes of failure. And another element of why these are so cheap is it's depreciation. Let's face it, the average Toyota Camry in a 5-year time frame is going to hold about 60 to 70% of its original value. That's why I still don't understand. Toyota buyers who are buying a 3-year-old Toyota have sort of lost their marbles. You might as well even just buy a brand new one and skip all the way down to an 8 or 10-year-old Toyota, because the old ones are still reliable. If you're buying a 2 or 3-year-old Toyota at still paying 80% of its original value, why? Why would you bother? There's fart in the seats, there's wear and tear on the brakes and the tires. Why would you bother buying a 3-year-old Toyota? Just to save 20% of its original value? That's where a BMW comes in handy. A 2020 BMW 330 xDrive, beautiful car with the B48, exceptionally well performing, 255 horsepower. Think about that car, a beautiful unit. Okay, brand new, $45,000. The average 330 now, based on the average BMW depreciation of 60 to 70% in the same 5-year time frame, looks to be more like a $20,000 to $25,000 purchase off of a $45,000 new MSRP. You're saving a vast amount of money on depreciation of that slightly used BMW. There's certain models that are actually almost as reliable, if not more reliable, by BMW than some of the less reliable Japanese brands like Acuras. Think about Acura blowing rod bearings in their 3.5s. They're not without their faults. Say with the Toyota, the 3.4 liter that they just put in the Tundra, junk engines. As a generality, a Toyota RAV4 is a pretty reliable car. A BMW 330 with the later generation B48 is a pretty reliable car. And sure, while parts might be a little bit more expensive to replace, and that $250 diagnostic fee is a pain in the rump, the fact remains is you can get a vastly nicer car, better ergonomics, better safety in most cases, more airbag system, better lighting systems, better accident avoidance procedures. And I'm going to ask you a simple question. How much is your safety, well-being, and enjoyment for the driving experience truly worth in your mind? For me, I've always bought used BMWs because I see an immense amount of value. So that takes me to how I buy these cars, why I buy used BMWs, and why I generally don't buy new ones. I love the new cars, and I think they're great, and they have a place. But for me, I love the idea of getting bang for buck and to value that proposition that you're getting with a used BMW. Most BMWs in 5 years are going to lose about 40, 50, 60% of their value. How can you ignore that? This car here was $130,000. We bought it off the second owner, and this vehicle we paid $38,000 for a $130,000 car, and it was only 4 years old when we bought it. Therein lies the value proposition. You can get an immense amount of performance, car, bang for buck, for fractions. And I love it. And I've always bought used luxury cars, specifically many BMWs in my lifetime, at that 3 to 5 year time frame because of the value it offers. And with all of that said, everybody, be sure to check out right there. If you're looking maybe for a Mercedes-Benz on the used car market, there's a whole plethora of reasons why some of those are so cheap, as well as Audis. You're definitely going to want to check out those videos if you're looking for those cars as well. Hope to see each and every one of you real soon, everybody. Thanks again. Have a great one. Bye-bye.